The question that started it lit was late evening on the set of their first movie together. The lights were dim, the crew tired, and the air smelled of coffee and quiet laughter. Sandra Bullock sat on a wooden box, watching Keanu Reeves rehearse a scene again and again. Something about him made her curious. He never raised his voice, never seemed angry, never rushed. No matter how stressful the day was, he remained calm, like a quiet ocean that could not be disturbed. When the director finally called for a break, Sandra walked up to him. She was half joking, but half serious when she asked, "Why are you so calm all the time, Keanu? Don't you ever get tired or angry?" He smiled softly, his eyes deep but kind. "Anger doesn't fix anything," he said. "It just adds more noise. Calm helps me see things clearly." Sandra tilted her head, surprised. "That's not something most people can do." Keanu paused for a moment before replying. "It's not that I never feel anger. I just learned not to live in it." His tone was so gentle that Sandra didn't know how to respond. Something inside her shifted that night. She'd met hundreds of people in Hollywood, loud, proud, and full of energy, but no one quite like him. Later, as the crew packed up, Sandra watched him again. He stayed behind to help carry boxes, even though he didn't have to. He treated everyone, from the lighting assistant to the director, with the same respect. She noticed the small things, the way he listened carefully when someone spoke, the way he thanked people even for tiny favors. That night, on her way home, she couldn't stop thinking about his answer. "It's not that I never feel anger. I just learned not to live in it." She repeated it to herself like a line from a poem. She didn't yet know that behind his calm smile was a story of loss, love, and quiet strength that few had ever heard. Weeks later, during another long shooting day, Sandra found herself getting frustrated over a scene that wasn't going well. She felt tears of exhaustion pressing at the corners of her eyes. She turned, and there was Keanu leaning against a wall, waiting patiently, calm as always. He walked up to her and said quietly, "Breathe. It's just a scene, not the end of the world." Something in the way he said it made her laugh through her frustration. For the rest of the day, she worked better, calmer, freer. But what she didn't know yet was that Keanu's peace came from pain he rarely spoke about, pain that shaped the man he became. The calm that amazed her wasn't a gift he was born with. It was a choice he made after surviving storms that would have broken most people. And soon, she would find out why. The silence behind his calm days passed, and Sandra kept noticing little things about Keanu. The way he greeted every crew member by name. The way he sat quietly during breaks while others joked and scrolled on their phones. The way he smiled when someone else was happy, even if he had nothing to do with it. It wasn't just politeness. It was something deeper, something peaceful that came from inside him. One day during lunch, Sandra sat next to him under a half-built set wall. The sun was soft, and the noise of the city was far away. She asked again, but more softly this time, "Keanu, you always seem so at peace. Have you always been like this?" He looked at her for a moment, thinking. Then he said, "No. I used to be angry. At life or at people. At things I couldn't change." She frowned. "What changed?" He picked up a small stone and rolled it between his fingers before answering. "Loss," he said simply. "I lost people I loved, and for a long time, I didn't understand why life takes good people away. I was angry at everything, but anger didn't bring them back. It only kept me stuck in pain." Sandra didn't know what to say. She had heard rumors about the tragedies in his past, but she'd never asked him directly. Now, sitting there in silence, she felt the weight of his words. He went on quietly. "One day, I realized that if I kept living inside anger, I'd lose myself too. So I decided to honor them by living differently, by being kind, by staying calm, by not wasting the time I have left on hate." The air around them felt heavier. Sandra's throat tightened. "That's really brave," she whispered. He gave a small smile. "It's not bravery, it's survival. Calm is how I keep going." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. They just sat together, watching the crew move in the distance. She could feel his calmness like a quiet shield that wrapped around both of them. From that day, she started to see the world a little differently. When the director shouted, she didn't take it personally. When things went wrong, she tried to breathe instead of snap. And every time she felt herself losing control, she remembered Keanu's voice saying, "Breathe. It's not the end of the world." Weeks turned into months, and their friendship grew quietly. They talked about simple things, books, memories, music. Sometimes he would tell her small stories about growing up, about sleeping on couches, about riding the subway just to watch people and feel human again. He didn't speak like a star. He spoke like someone who had seen pain and still chose kindness. One evening, after a long day, Sandra found him sitting alone outside the studio. He was staring at the night sky, his face calm but distant. She sat beside him. "You think too much," she said lightly. He smiled. Maybe I just listened too much to silence." She laughed softly. "You make silence sound beautiful." "It is," he said. "Silence doesn't judge. It doesn't demand. It just lets you breathe." His words sank deep into her heart. She realized then that his calm wasn't the absence of emotion, it was the mastery of it. It was strength disguised as stillness. That night, as she drove home, Sandra couldn't stop thinking about how fragile life really was, and how few people knew how to live it with grace. She began to understand why so many who worked with Keanu called him a light, because he didn't need to shine loud. He simply existed with quiet goodness. But what she didn't know yet was that another event was about to test that calmness again, in a way that would shake even him. Something from his past was about to return, and she would be there to see the man behind the peace face a storm he thought he had already survived. The storm returns the next morning. Sandra arrived early on set. The sky was gray, and the air felt heavy, like something unspoken was hanging over everyone. She found Keanu sitting alone by the edge of the stage, looking down at his phone. His usual calmness was there, but his eyes seemed different, distant, as if he had been somewhere else all night. "You okay?" she asked softly, walking up to him. He looked up and gave a small smile, the kind people use to hide pain. "Yeah," he said, just thinking. But Sandra could feel it wasn't just that. She didn't push, though. She knew he only spoke when he was ready. The day went on, but Keanu wasn't himself. He forgot lines, something he almost never did. During one emotional scene, he stopped midway and just stood there, staring at the ground. The set fell silent. The director called for a break, and Keanu quietly walked away. Sandra followed him outside. He was sitting on the steps, his hands folded, staring at nothing. She sat next to him and said quietly, "You don't have to talk, but if you want to, I'm here." He stayed silent for a moment before whispering, "Today's the anniversary." "Of what?" she asked gently. "Of someone I lost," he said. "Someone who made me believe in peace again." The pain in his voice was soft but deep, like it came from a place long buried. Sandra said nothing. She just listened. "She used to tell me that calm isn't about pretending life is perfect," he continued. "It's about loving it even when it's not." After she was gone, I tried to remember that. But some days, his voice broke slightly. Some days it's harder than others. Sandra felt her eyes sting. She had seen actors cry before, but this was different. This wasn't a performance. It was raw, unfiltered truth. "You still carry her," she said gently. He nodded. "Every day. I think that's why I stay calm. Because if I start breaking, I might never stop." The honesty in his words touched her more than anything she'd ever heard. She realized then that his calmness wasn't a shield, it was an act of love. He stayed gentle because the world had already given him enough pain. Later that evening, when filming ended, Sandra found herself walking alone in the parking lot. Keanu was there again, helping one of the crew members lift heavy lights into a van. When the man thanked him, Keanu just smiled and said, "We're all part of the same team." Sandra watched him for a while. Even on his hardest day, he still gave kindness. That was when she understood what made him so different. He didn't live for himself. He lived to make others' burdens lighter. The next day, she brought him a small cup of coffee before shooting started. He looked surprised. "You didn't have to," he said. "I know," she smiled. "But I wanted to." He took it, smiled softly, and whispered, "Thank you." They sat together for a while before filming began. The air was quiet, but it wasn't empty. It was peaceful. Sandra said, "You know, people talk about heroes in movies, but I think real heroes are the ones who keep their hearts open after the world tried to close them. Keanu looked at her, eyes glimmering slightly. "Maybe we're all just trying to be that," he said. And that day when the cameras rolled, something changed between them. Their scenes carried new emotion, not because they were acting but because they understood each other in a way only two gentle souls could. But just as things began to feel lighter, news came that would test everything he had built inside himself. A friend from his past, someone he hadn't seen in years, was in trouble, and Keanu was the only one who could help. What he did next would show Sandra the true meaning of calmness under fire, and it would change both of their lives forever. Calm under breath. Next few days passed quietly, but something about Keanu's presence had changed. Sandra could sense the weight he was carrying even when he smiled. She didn't ask, she had learned that sometimes silence speaks louder than questions. One evening, as they wrapped up shooting, Keanu got a call. His face shifted as he listened. The calm in his eyes flickered for a second. He turned away, speaking in a low voice. When he hung up, he stood still for a long moment, as if trying to decide what to do next. Sandra walked closer. "Everything okay?" He hesitated before answering. "A friend from my old neighborhood," he said. "He's in trouble. He's been sick, and he doesn't have anyone else. I need to go see him. Do you want me to come?" She asked softly. He gave a small, grateful smile. "You don't have to, I know," she said. "But maybe you shouldn't go alone." He looked at her for a moment, then nodded. "All right." That night, they drove through the city in silence. The streets were quiet, rain tapping against the windshield. Keanu's hands were steady on the wheel, but Sandra could see the tightness in his jaw. They arrived at a small apartment building on the edge of downtown. The lights inside were dim. A thin man opened the door when they knocked. His face was pale, his eyes tired, but when he saw Keanu, he managed a weak smile. "Man, I didn't think you'd come," he whispered. Keanu stepped forward and hugged him. "Of course I came," he said softly. "Your family." Sandra watched quietly as Keanu knelt to help his friend sit, bringing him water and listening to his story. There was no trace of fame or distance between them, just quiet care. His friend, whose name was Mark, told them about his illness, about losing his job, and about the bills he couldn't pay. Keanu didn't interrupt once. He just listened, nodding, his calm presence filling the small room like light through a cracked window. When Mark finished, Keanu said simply, "We'll figure this out." Sandra knew he meant it. The next morning, Keanu made phone calls, arranged medical help, and quietly covered the bills. He didn't want anyone to know. When Mark tried to thank him, Keanu shook his head. "Just get better, that's all." On the drive back, Sandra looked at him. "You always do this, don't you? Help people quietly." He shrugged lightly. "I don't see the point of shouting kindness. If it's real, it doesn't need noise. You never stop surprising me," she said. He smiled gently. "The world's already loud enough. I just try to bring peace where I can." They drove in silence for a while. But it wasn't an empty silence. It was warm, like a shared secret. Later that day, during filming, Sandra couldn't stop thinking about what she'd seen. Keanu had faced so much loss, yet he still gave more than most people who had everything. She realized that his calm wasn't just peace, it was strength born from love, from understanding pain and choosing to heal others instead of hurting back. But the universe wasn't done testing him yet. A few days later, while the cast was having dinner together, Keanu received another message. He read it, his expression unreadable. Sandra leaned closer. "Bad news?" she asked quietly. He looked at her, eyes calm but heavy. "Mark's condition got worse. The doctors said he might not make it through the night." Her heart sank. "Do you want to go?" He nodded. "I have to." And so, once again, they drove through the rain. This time, the silence between them was heavier, filled with the ache of things they couldn't control. When they reached the hospital, Keanu walked straight to the room. Mark was weak but awake. Keanu sat beside him, holding his hand. No words were needed. They just stayed there, in quiet connection. As the hours passed, Sandra watched something she'd never seen before: pure, unbroken compassion. Keanu didn't cry or panic. He just stayed, whispering small words of peace when Mark drifted in and out of sleep. Around midnight, Mark took his last breath. Keanu sat still, eyes closed, hands still holding his friend's. Sandra felt tears streaming down her face. But Keanu's expression was calm sad. Yes, but calm. When they walked out, she said through tears, "How do you stay so calm even now?" He looked at her with eyes full of quiet grief and said softly, "Because calm is the only way I can love him without falling apart." And at that moment, she understood the truth behind his peace. It wasn't about strength. It was about love that refused to break, even in loss. The peace that love leaves behind. Drive back from the hospital was silent. The rain had stopped, but the city lights reflected off the wet roads, making everything shimmer like tears that refused to fall. Sandra sat beside Keanu, her heart heavy, her throat tight. She wanted to say something, but every word she thought of felt too small for what he had just lost again. Keanu's single quotes S face was calm, but not empty. It was the calm of someone who had made peace with pain a long time ago. His eyes were soft, looking out the window as if searching for something only he could see. After a while, Sandra finally spoke. "You did everything you could," she said gently. Keanu nodded. "Sometimes that's not enough," he whispered. "But it has to be." His voice was steady, but she could feel the ache underneath it. She watched as he took a deep breath, as if letting go of something invisible. "When someone you care about dies," he continued, "you can't hold them by crying forever. You have to hold them by living better. That's what calm really is. It's not about not feeling. It's about feeling deeply and still choosing peace." Sandra looked at him in awe. "Most people would fall apart," she said. "You stand tall." He gave a small, tired smile. "I fall too," he said. Just quietly, she looked away, blinking back tears. There was something sacred about the way he carried pain not as a burden, but as proof of love. They drove the rest of the way in silence. When he dropped her home, she hesitated before getting out. "You're sure you'll be okay?" she asked softly. "I will," he said. "Thank you for being there." "Anytime," she replied, meaning it more than she expected. The next few days on set felt different. Keanu was quieter than usual, but not withdrawn. He still smiled, still helped, still listened, but Sandra could sense the grief resting in the corners of his calmness. It wasn't darkness. It was depth. During a short break one afternoon, the two of them sat together again under a soft winter sun. She handed him a cup of tea. He thanked her, his fingers brushing hers for a second. A small, silent connection between two souls who understood each other without words, you know. She said gently, "When I first asked you why you were so calm, I thought it was just your personality. Now I see it's something else entirely." He looked at her, curious. "What do you see now?" She smiled softly. "I see someone who turned pain into peace." He didn't answer right away. He just looked at her for a long moment, eyes thoughtful, and then said quietly, "Peace doesn't mean the storm never happened. It just means I stopped letting it drown me." Her chest tightened. "That's beautiful," she whispered. "It's survival," he said simply. They sat together for a long time, not speaking, watching the light shift across the studio lot. There was comfort in the quiet, as if the air itself respected what they'd been through. Later that evening, as they filmed one of their most emotional scenes, Sandra couldn't help but notice how every line he delivered carried truth. When he looked at her during the take, it wasn't acting. It was real emotion, pain, peace, love, all mixed into one expression that said more than words ever could. When the director yelled cut, the crew applauded, but Keanu just smiled softly, humble as ever. He didn't bask in praise. He simply nodded, as if grateful for another chance to create something meaningful. After the shoot, Sandra walked with him to the parking lot. The air was cold, stars faint above them. "You ever think about taking a break?" she asked. "You give so much to everyone else. Maybe it's time to rest." He chuckled softly. "Maybe one day. But right now, I think I'm exactly where I need to be. Helping others." He nodded. "That's what keeps me calm. Helping makes the world feel less heavy." She smiled faintly. "And you make it feel a little safer." He looked at her, eyes warm. "So do you." It was a simple moment, but it meant everything. Because in that quiet exchange, both of them realized something profound. Sometimes, the calmest people are the ones who have walked through the loudest storms. And their peace isn't weakness. It's proof of strength that survived. But the story didn't end there. Weeks later, when filming wrapped, something unexpected happened, something that would show Sandra just how deeply Keanu's calmness could change not only her, but everyone around him. The answer that changed her forever. Weeks later, the film wrapped. The last day on set was full of laughter, photos, and goodbyes. Everyone was celebrating, but Sandra found herself watching Keanu more than anyone else. He smiled as he helped crew members pack up equipment, hugged the makeup team, and thanked the lighting crew personally. It wasn't the kind of goodbye filled with noise and cheers. It was quiet, genuine, and full of warmth. When everyone started leaving, Sandra stayed behind. She found him sitting alone on a bench under a tree near the lot, the evening light painting gold across his face. "So this is it," she said softly. Walking toward him, he smiled. "Yeah, another chapter closed." She sat down beside him. "You really are something, you know that." "How so?" he asked, his voice gentle. "You came into this whole set and made everyone calmer, kinder. People talk about your movies, but I think your greatest work is how you make others feel," she said. He chuckled quietly. "I just try to make things a little better, that's all." "You do more than that," she said, her eyes glistening. "You make people believe there's still good in this world." For a moment, they just sat in silence. Then she asked the question she'd been thinking about since the beginning. "Keanu," she said, "that first night I asked you why you were so calm, and you told me it was because anger doesn't fix anything. But I think there's more to it than that, isn't there?" He looked at her with that quiet stillness that always made her feel like the world had slowed down. "Yeah," he said softly. "There's more." She waited, patient, as the wind rustled the leaves above them. "I learned something a long time ago," he said. "Life isn't fair. It takes people you love. It gives pain when you least expect it, and it never tells you why. But if you keep asking why, you stay trapped in the hurt. So I stopped asking. I started giving instead." "Giving?" she asked quietly. He nodded. "Time, kindness, patience, whatever I have left. Because if I can make someone else's day a little easier, maybe the pain I've felt means something. Maybe that's how peace begins." His words hit her like sunlight after rain, soft but blinding. "You found peace by giving it," she whispered. He smiled gently. "Maybe peace is something you build, one act at a time." They sat there as the sky turned darker, streetlights flickering to life around them. Sandra felt something shift inside her. She realized that calm wasn't about being emotionless. It was about being present. It was about choosing love when the world gave you every reason not to, you know. She said after a long silence, "I think you've changed the way I see life." He turned toward her, surprised. "Me?" "Yeah," she said, smiling faintly. "You taught me that peace isn't the absence of chaos, it's the courage to stay gentle inside it." Keanu looked down for a moment, humbled. "That means a lot," he said softly. "Thank you." They didn't need to say more. The night around them was quiet, and in that stillness, something deeper than words filled the space between them: respect, gratitude, and a quiet understanding that both had healed something in each other without even realizing it. A few months later, when interviews for the movie began, a journalist asked Sandra a question on camera. What was it like working with Keanu Reeves? She smiled, her eyes soft. "It was like standing next to peace," she said. "He reminds you that calm isn't weakness, it's power. And he makes you want to be kinder, too." That clip went viral. People from all over the world shared it, writing about how kindness was the rarest strength of all. And though Keanu never commented, those who knew him smiled quietly, because they knew he didn't need to. And somewhere, sitting in his quiet home, he probably smiled too, because he had learned long ago that peace, once shared, never really ends. And that was the answer that changed her forever. Asterisk.